My name is Chuck Holloway, and I have the great pleasure to moderate, or should I say try to moderate, this panel. I know something about these gentlemen, and so we've got a full hour and 15 minutes, and we want to use it as well as we can. You should have one of these. If not, we'll pass it around, which gives you a brief overview of the individuals, and it also tells you that we're trying to think about this in three parts. One will be a leadership and personal challenges during times of distress. Then lessons learned from your failure experience, because each one of these gentlemen has had the great pleasure of having something that worked and something that didn't work. And then bouncing back. So so what's different second time or the next time around, both from a personal point of view and from a business point of view. So that's what we're trying to do. And I'm going to ask each of them to tell you a little bit about the particular failure that they had when they start addressing these questions. But I want to just quickly introduce first Kamran, Elahian, who is a veteran entrepreneur. He has started over 10 companies. CA Systems, Cirrus Logic, Momenta, which is the company that didn't work. It was a pen-based company. Neomagic, Centillium Communications, Actilis Networks, Informative, Intopia, Greenfield Networks. He's now the chairman and global catalyst partner chairman of Global Catalyst Partners, which is a venture firm. He's also started and founded and partially funded Schools Online, a not-for-profit charity program that tries to get the internet into schools. He did his original work at the University of Utah and then came to Stanford as part of the honors co-op program when he was working for Hewlett-Packard. So please welcome Kamran, Elahian. Next in line down here is Kaleil Isaza Tuzman. He is now the partner of Recognition Group, LLC. It's a corporate restructuring group. Prior to founding and becoming the CEO of GovWorks, which is the company that he will tell you a little bit about, because it went up like this and then it went down, although they did sell it. And so some of this technology is still being used today. Is that right? So that's an important thing, I think, to think about here, is even though the company doesn't make it, there's a contribution that goes beyond that. But before that, he co-founded Inicial Ventures, a venture capital firm investing in Latin America and Hispanic-focused companies. He spent 5 years at Goldman Sachs. He's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and advisor to the World Bank's Gateway Project, a sponsor of the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies, board member of Micro Mentor Program, the Aspen Institute, and on the board of Junior Achievement in New York. He's a graduate of Harvard University, and so please welcome Kaleil. Mike Teare is currently the CEO of Santa Cruz Networks, which is a venture-backed company that delivers rich media communications. Mike actually is from England, and
he's called Keith.
Where did I get Mike? Keith.
We thought you were. I don't mind being called Mike.
Where's Mike?
We thought you were from Australia.
Yeah. Just call me Sam. Keith, I apologize, but Keith is from England, and he graduated from the University of Kent in Canterbury. He has 2 degrees in sociology, a bachelor's and a master's degree in sociology, a bachelor's also in political science. So he's a self-described sociologist who is a technologist by choice, which I think is interesting to see the fact that we have 3 people here who have founded technology-based companies. One of them has a degree in technology, one in government, one in sociology. So it's very interesting to see how that interplay goes. He, prior to founding Santa Cruz Networks, he was the founder of 3 companies in Europe that were very successful. EasyNet, one of Europe's leading ISPs, a founder of, it doesn't give me the other companies. What were the other companies?
A company called Net Benefit, which was the first domain name reseller in the world, and then the world's first cyber cafe called Siberia in London, which became franchised many in Asia.
Yeah. The company that you may hear more about today is RealNames, which is a company that he started and didn't work very well. So I want to start now, start with Kamran. And Kamran, the question that we're going to start with is this leadership and personal challenges during times of distress. And if you'll describe your experience both from a managerial point of view, how do you lead when a company's going down? What do you tell people when and how do you do that? As well as from a personal point of view, what's it like to try to manage in that kind of environment? And then anything you want to say about sort of the emotions that you went through and came out of.
Okay. Good afternoon. I guess, is the sound okay? Do I need to? Well, that's a very loaded question. My circumstances at the failure of Momenta were kind of unique in a sense that I really did not see much of the signs that the thing was falling, was coming down. And a big reason for that was pride. I had 2 very successful companies at young age. When I was 27, the first company that I started was a software company that 3 years later, Tektronix bought it for $75 million. And then the second company, Cirrus Logic, grew to become fastest growth semiconductor company in the Valley. It went from 0 to 1.1 billion in less than 10 years. So kind of you are thinking you can't do anything wrong, and you have the Midas touch. And when you go and start your company, investors line up to throw money at you, you kind of start to think that you are something special. And if I could use the word, if not, I would say your manure does not stink. And so as part of that, whenever the odds are against you stacked up as an entrepreneur, you just always learn to have your focus and forget about all of the things. If you want to be successful as an entrepreneur, your mantra should be, don't confuse yourself with the facts. Just charge forward, do the right kinds of things. And that's the way you can go against all the odds. And if you look at the success of the first company or the second company, each one of them were redefining an existing new environment. CAE was the first company that was talking about computer-aided engineering when CAD/CAM was the major market, and then after CAE companies came, the market completely shifted, and Cirrus Logic was the first fabless semiconductor company, and before that everybody was building fabs. So from that side, you have this belief that you are on the right track, that you are doing something that is correct, and regardless of what everybody tells you or what comes up, you should ignore it. Now, unfortunately, in this case, not too many people were opposing me. I mean, it had just become like when we developed our product, when we applied for our patents, we had some portfolio of 23 patents. When we introduced our product, we were on the cover of 20 magazines. And we got something like 8, 9, 10 awards as the most valuable product of the year, as the greatest thing since sliced bread, all of that. It is kind of tough to think that, you have got a lousy company or that things are not going to go the right way that you want to go. And my projections for the first year of revenue were 100 million. I mean, you just look at it and you say, at Cirrus Logic, our first year of revenue was 6 million. And at Momenta, my goal was 100 million. 99 was not acceptable. And so you kind of start to believe your own hype, believe your own PR, all of that. You start to think that you can't do anything wrong. And as obstacles are in front of you, as your team people come and say, we got problem in here, we got problem in here. You keep pushing them and saying that, no, work on it. There is a way, find another way, do something else. And what was different about Momenta than my previous companies was, when you start a company, you can take three kinds of risks. You can take a technology risk, which by definition, if you're a technologist and you want to start a technology company, you better take huge amount of technology risk or you would not have a real chance for success. The second thing is you can take a people risk. And people risk was quite high at Momenta, but I also had people risk at Cirrus Logic also. I'd learned how to bring people from different backgrounds, information together. The third thing that you can have as a risk is a market risk. And that was huge at Momenta because we were going after this market, that pen-based computing, and we were saying that you do not need to interact with a computer using your keyboard. Why not use a pen and paper? And yes, 10 years later, finally, the Palm Pilot started to sell millions of them per year, and other products came along, and it became a huge market. But no matter what we could do or what we would do, the market had its own pace of developing, and this was totally unknown to me. And unfortunately, part of the thing that I mistook when I was starting the company, everybody was telling me at that time that our biggest challenge is going to be distribution channels. They were saying you start a company with an unknown name, unknown type of computer, how would you get the attention of the big distribution channel? And at that time, the big distribution channels were Computerland, Intelligent Electronics, Comp USA. These were 1, 2, 3. And everybody was telling me that no product, nobody could get the shelf space on these places. Well, I met with the presidents of all these 3 companies, and they saw the version of the product, and they all gave me these amazing POs. And we thought, wow, the job is done. What I didn't know was that, okay, they were excited about our product, but the customers are not going to buy it. And it did not look like a regular PC. It did not have the normal functions of a PC. We had very unusual, different design. It looked like an arrowhead, and the concept of a tablet and pen and paper, and the things that it did was very, very unusual. But again, as I say, my biggest failure was I could not see the signs that, hey, maybe the things are not going to be as rosy as we want to. And it was April 1st, 1992. I came to work, and I noticed that there is a board meeting. And I said, wait a minute, I'm chairman, CEO, president. I didn't call a board meeting. And, I had so much confidence that whatever I do, you can't do anything wrong. I can't do anything wrong. The thought would never go in my mind that my investors would fire me. I mean, how would they dare to do that? But they said, you're fired. And I thought this was April 1st, April Fool's Day joke, But unfortunately, it was the truth. They said, out of here. And so I did not, in some ways, it was the best thing that happened, because if they had not fired me, I would have continued to put more money into it. I would have talked a lot more investors to put money into it, would have put every dime I had into it, and the results would still have been the same, because no matter what, we would not be able to, keep the company going for another 4, 5, 6 years till the market would catch up. So it was very nice that of investors to fire me, but at that time, obviously, I didn't think that way, because I said, how could the company survive without me? And 6 months later, when they were closing down the thing, and they had brought a new CEO to replace me and all of that, and he left, they closed down the company, all of that. I kept telling, if I was in charge, I could have done something, whatever. But the facts are, no matter what I did, I could not have made that company successful, because the time was not right. And even when Apple came and put a few $100 million into it, Motorola put $100 million, I don't know, so many other companies put so much money, it just was not going to happen. It wasn't an issue of money, it was an issue of time. So I did not see exactly what happened as the company is going on. But in terms of some of the steps that we did take when we saw that the money was running down, first step I did was I made sure that my salary was $1 a year, and I did that a year before actually our last round of financing. And because the team had done so much good work, we said that we are not going to lay off anybody. We had a voting by consensus within the company that should we lay off a number of people and keep the company till we raise the next round, or should we have it as a whole thing and everybody take a pay cut? And everybody voted to take a pay cut because they all believed in it. And not a single person in the company left while I was there. I mean, the culture was so strong that people really believed that they were doing something good. And
let me turn to Kaleil now. And Kamran didn't really have to manage on the way down, I think, the way you did. You stuck around, right? And you sort of took the company and then were there when you actually sold it, isn't that right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about GovWorks and what it was that you think, made it difficult for you to be successful with GovWorks, but also, so what did you do when you decided, when you saw that things were going down? And did you change your leadership style? What did you tell people?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think Kamran hit it very much on the head in terms of denial. I think anybody who's been through a failure experience knows that a lot of it is due to denial. If you're in touch enough with yourself, with your investors, with your employees and customers, most importantly, you do always have the signs of things not going right. And you usually even have the remedies intrinsic kind of in your stakeholder base, but it's a matter of not seeing them. And I certainly fell prey to that, and I echo what you said, Kamran, 100% in terms of kind of believing your own hype. You could use stronger words. I'll tell you about GovWorks in brief, but I just wanted to touch on the point you made around sticking around through the restructuring. I can't claim any kind of smarts in terms of deciding to do that. I'm very glad I did. I'm very grateful in my career and in my life that I did. The way that it happened is we had $60 million of financial backing from a number of different venture firms. We were co-led by Mayfield and KKR, which are two very different types of funding providers, Mayfield being a traditional venture firm within 10 minutes of here, and KKR, we had Henry Kravis on our board. For those of you who have worked in the buyout world, that's an extremely different type of culture and a different firm that was in a venture kind of business for the first time. And it was very interesting having Henry Kravis on the board, for example, and Maynard Jackson on the board, who was a very vocal Democrat and former mayor of Atlanta. Those are other stories I could tell you about shouting matches on our board that had nothing to do with our company, unfortunately. We should have had more shouting matches about the company, actually. But what happened is Mike Leventhal, who's the board member from Mayfield, who's now at Thomas Weisel Capital Partners, Venture Partners, came when we had that board meeting. And unfortunately, ours was a very similar experience. I was going to either nod or cry. I decided to nod when you made the comment, but I could have gone the other direction of coming in and having that board meeting. I had the same experience. Unfortunately, our board meeting was in a fishbowl. It was basically in a room that had glass all around it. That was right in the middle of our production floor where all the programmers were, which we thought was a brilliant idea, the idea of having the team all together and no secrets and so forth. But what it meant is I basically, the company was effectively terminated while I was surrounded literally by people right outside the window. And some of them actually had their faces up against the window. But Mike Leventhal, who was on the board, did something that I'll be forever grateful for. He took me out of the board meeting as we ended. And there were some board members who were going out to lunch. I should say erstwhile board members, because the board resigned en masse at that moment. And he said,
Mike, including the investor.
Including Mike, yeah. Because to make a long story short, we were in a sale process that at that moment was decided to be done through a sale and a pre-pack bankruptcy. So the company was sold, but in bankruptcy. Of course, I didn't know that until that morning. Mike said, "Let's take a walk around the block." And I took a walk. It was a freezing cold day downtown. We were based in downtown New York, right around the Tribeca Grand, which was being built at the time. I remember the construction site. There's a lot of noise in the background. And he literally put his arm around my shoulder, and he said, this is a horrible experience. And there was a moment in which I thought, this is the sickest thing ever. I thought this guy was going to give me a pep talk. And for a moment, I really thought he was going to rub it in around the block and walk me through how much money he lost. And I said, yes. And he went on to say that I should feel, terrible, effectively, right now. Use slightly different language. And I said, yes. And he said, well, I think what I'm going to recommend to the board members, and even though there was no board at that time, they effectively, held control of the company, is that you stick around through the restructuring. And it was the last thing in the world that I wanted to hear at that moment. I couldn't think of anything else other than kind of crawling under a sheet somewhere and staying there for 2 years. But he said, you're going to learn, I guarantee you, you're going to learn more through this process than you learned in the last 2 years running the company in what you thought were good times. And he was 100% right. Running it through the sale, through the bankruptcy, through the layoffs, through the post-bankruptcy restructuring period, where actually the company is now called GovOne Solutions and is almost the original size of GovWorks at our peak at this point, was an extraordinary experience. And here's what I learned. First of all, I learned that the importance of transparency in leadership, and that when things are going badly, you had to have a smile on, and you had to always have an optimistic outlook. And what I believe now is that leadership, both in difficult times and in good times, is not about unrelenting optimism. It is about unrelenting determination, but it's about candor as well. And optimism that's unfounded is incredible, or it doesn't carry with it respect. Your team, including the cliche, the receptionist at the front door, knows what's going on. Your salespeople know that a product isn't working. Your product people know that something's not working. Your investors know that you're not hitting expectations again and again and again. So the being candid. And so my leadership approach now, and I work since GovWorks, I've done 4 different interim CEO assignments in companies that were going through some sort of trouble, either balance sheet related, operational, capital structure disputes, and so on. And the first day that I come in now, I say, listen, we're going to put the budget up on the server, no password protected. We're going to talk about the things that we need to do. I don't have any magic bullet. You in this room have the tools to make this successful. I need to be able to lead us to success but you need to help me in understanding what those tools are. And just being totally candid and open to being wrong. There's often, I think, a mistake, especially with first-time entrepreneurs, and I definitely made this mistake, of thinking that you've got to put a good face on it, as I've said, and a corollary to that, thinking that you're supposed to know everything. And as a leader, particularly in an entrepreneurial enterprise, not only are you not supposed to know everything, you by definition don't know everything. What you've been doing has probably not been tried before. You talked about the different types of risks. So you've got to be open to learning from within your team, from the market, and so forth. So that's the primary lesson that I learned.
That's very interesting. In both your cases, the board came in and delivered the message. It sounds like since your employees had their face against the glass, they might have suspected something was going on. Keith, for you, did somebody else tell you this wasn't working, or did you decide it wasn't working? And if so, how did you handle those situations?
Yeah, RealNames was very different to the 2 stories I've just heard, except in one respect, I learned a lot from it. But the process was very different. The first thing is I moved to the U.S. from England to found RealNames, so it was like a huge personal thing. It was my idea. It was my company. I couldn't get the company funded between 97 and 98, so I funded it myself. So it was my money. I hired a great team of people, mostly the former technology leadership team from Next, who at that time had just been acquired by Apple, and a bunch of people left. So Jean-Marie Hulot, who was the CTO of Next, became my co-founder. And here I was, my previous company had gone public at a valuation of £20 million, which in American terms was tiny. Suddenly I was in Silicon Valley, and the thing I'd founded that I really believed in, on day one almost, was a big idea. And the fact that some of these people joined, who were way more well-known than I was, made it a very big idea. so I put my own money into it and lived in rental accommodation for a year. We had a small office in Embarcadero, in Town and Country Village, actually above the Cookbook restaurant. We had 1,000 square feet there with banks of servers and so on. And we built this technology that allowed Japanese, Chinese, Korean, and any language in the world to be used as an internet address. And I know it may seem an obvious thing, but you can't do that. The web addressing system is A, B, C through Z, and 0 through 9, and that's all the characters you got to play with for a web address. So we made it so you could use every character in every language that was a written language in the whole world. And people in Beijing could type Chinese, and people in Korea could type Korean, and they'd go to a web page that was the name of that thing. Became known as Internet Keywords, and for the first 3 years we couldn't figure out how to make money from it. We knew it was like wonderful, but we couldn't figure out how should we be selling this thing. And we went through from 8 people to 350 people, and about $80 million of financing took us through to August of 1999. And we'd figured out in those 3 years that we were in the same space as Google. We were in the same space as what was Overture, that was just bought by Yahoo. It was previously called Go2.com. Interestingly enough, RealNames was originally called Go.com, and Bill Gross called his company Go2.com, having seen our business plan at that time. And it was really about, the business model was getting paid for taking people to a website. That's simple as that. If I bring you visitors, you pay me. And we spent a lot of money and went through lots of business model changes. And in fact, the learning experience there was probably more profound than the failure at the end, because in a way we had many failures. Every business model we tried for 3 years that didn't work was a kind of a mini failure that then led to, okay, maybe this will work. And I haven't got time to talk about all that micro stuff, but there was a lot of learning there. Eventually we figured out one that worked, and at that time Microsoft said, you know what, we really like what you're doing. And at that time I don't know if you ever tried I Feel Lucky on Google, where you type something in, and if you click I Feel Lucky, it just takes you there. That was our technology that was doing that. And we were in every search engine, Alta Vista, InfoSeek, MSN, everyone. We were supplying this kind of I Feel Lucky kind of behavior. Microsoft came along and said, you know what, we'd like to put you in the browser, because we think if people could just type in their browser, Stanford Business School, 3 words with spaces in the middle, and go right to that web page, we think a lot of people would do that. And we had a pretty tough negotiation with Microsoft, but eventually we agreed a deal. And the deal was they would put us in the browser and we would give them $120 million. But frankly, that didn't seem a lot of money. We were filed for an IPO. We were probably going to raise $200 million or so. Mary Meeker was our underwriter at Morgan Stanley, was the analyst. Things seemed really, really good. And better still, the $120 million, they would take $80 million in stock. So they actually took $80 million in stock. That was 20% of the company. So we owed them $40 million, and we paid them the first 15 anyway. We had cash in the bank. We paid them the first 15. So all we actually owed them was $25 million. And this was a worldwide deal for the browser. We did the deal. Almost a week later, I did a deal with the Chinese government to sell Chinese language web addresses in China through all the official channels. We got a similar deal in Japan, a $28 million 3-year deal in Korea, and it seemed like a really smart deal to have done. It was a 3-year deal, renewable annually at mutual consent, so it wasn't forever. So there's risk in the deal because anything could happen. We knew the risk. At the board level, we talked about the risk and said, these guys are very powerful. They could switch us off after 3 years, and we've got nothing. So what should we do? And we all said, let's take the risk, but here's what we should do. Let's just build the biggest set of partnerships you could possibly build, so that if they do want to switch us off, it isn't just us they're switching off, but it's the Chinese government, blah, 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 blah. So let's make it a very hard decision for them. That's all we can really do. We had some patent protection, but technologies can always work around patents and end up with a similar end result, but doing it in a different way. So we didn't really feel the patent protection was going to be good enough here. So rolling the clock forward, company got profitable in Q1 2002.
The business model was still getting paid per transaction?
No, we evolved it to a flat fee per name per year. Basically, the price came down and down and down as the volume got up and up and up. By Q1 2002, we were doing 1 billion name resolutions a quarter. So, we were making about $3 million of cash per quarter at that time. And it was just the very early stages. I mean, that was just the beginning of the model beginning to work. So everyone was feeling great. Microsoft suddenly called us up and said, we're not going to renew the contract. This is at the end. This is coming up to the end of year 2. It was in November of 2001. They first said, we're thinking about whether we want to renew the contract. So suddenly there's a red flag, and I spent a lot of time in Redmond, some things I probably can't talk too openly about, but VeriSign were a 10% shareholder in the company as well. And they went to VeriSign and said, if you buy these guys, because VeriSign's obviously big, with a lot of revenue, we'll keep the deal going, but you're going to have to guarantee us $100 million a year. But we need you to buy these guys because they're too small, you're big, this thing could work. VeriSign, no way they're going to commit to $100 million a year guaranteed to Microsoft for a product they don't even own, they only own 10% of. So I stepped up and said to Microsoft, you know what, I'll guarantee you $100 million a year if you keep the deal going. But my board signed off on that as well. Microsoft felt that wasn't worth the paper it was written on, which they could have been right, could have been wrong. I don't think anyone really knows. We finally had a face-to-face in Redmond in March of 2002. And at the start of the meeting, they said, well, we want to talk about your proposal. So I said, well, I only really want to talk about the proposal if you haven't already made your decision. Otherwise, I'd rather talk about the consequences of your decision. So they said, okay, we made our decision. Let's not talk about the proposal. We're not going to renew the deal. So I said, okay, well, just for 2 sentences, why not? And they said, well, we just feel that 1 billion resolutions a quarter, if that was going into our search engine, that's $25 million a quarter, and you're only paying us $6 million. And I said, yeah, but you own 20% of the company, and I've offered to pay you a lot more. And they said, we'd rather just not have this and just do it ourselves. Now, looking back after the fact, they've just done the same thing 2 months ago to LookSmart, who were a partner for them in the directory services area, exactly the same pattern. And they really are very focused on their own search technology to compete with Google. And the team at that time, in 2002, that made this decision was in charge of what they called natural language navigation systems, which included their search. And they clearly had an internal plan that we just were not part of. We were in the way. As well as in the short term, they could make more revenue by not having us. And at that time, MSN was in a revenue crunch. So there were very good short-term reasons why they should have made this decision from their own view of the world. I would argue very bad from any long-term view, because now you can't type Chinese in the browser and have it go to a Chinese web page. It doesn't work anymore. But from a short term, it made a lot of sense. So personally, I was blown away. I mean, I'd been through a lot. The company had gone to 350 people, down to 80 as the
80 at this point in time.
Down to 80 people at this point in time.
So you had a year or so to absorb this?
Yeah, we kind of restructured and got the company to the size where it was profitable and growing, right. Where the costs and the revenues were in line with each other. I was even in November 2000 able to do a private round of financing after the IPO didn't happen. The bubble burst, the IPO didn't happen. I was able to do a private round of financing at a $200 million up valuation from an August 1999 round. $520 million pre-money valuation, and raised $50 million from, just A++ investors. So there was a lot of belief in the company, and the company was executing real well. So this just came from nowhere. It was like, wow. Suddenly your whole world was pulled from under your feet. And I had 2 emotions. One is I was angry. And so I told my board that I was going to publish a weblog and publish all the documents, the private documents, and I did that. And Microsoft very quickly sent a note and said to the board, you've got to take this guy's weblog needs to come down. So I, as chairman of the board, proposed a motion that my weblog should be closed, and I voted for the motion. And then I told the board I was resigning and I didn't intend to comply with the board's wishes because I was just really angry. I mean, there's no way I was taking that weblog down. I got 1 million visitors in a week, and it was like a whole-page story in the Wall Street Journal. And I just wanted to give as much pain back as I was feeling myself. Whatever I could do to give pain, I wanted to give pain. And that lasted probably about a month. If you go and look at my weblog, you'll see the postings get less and less and less every day after about a month. And then I went on holiday for a year. I just said, okay, well, I helped the company go through its closing phase for a couple of months. And I just...
So when, by the time you went on holiday, the company is actually had been wound down?
Yeah, we wound it down. We decided we didn't need to go into bankruptcy. We had $15 million in cash in the bank. We were profitable. We owed Microsoft $25 million. That's how they actually forced the closure of the company. They called the note that covered the other money. And so they got most of that $15 million in cash. There was a little bit left for other creditors, there were hardly any other creditors. So
how did you change your leadership style other than decide to get mad and put up this when you learned? I mean, you had almost a year, right? To worry about this.
Only 3 or 4 months.
3 or 4 months. So what did you tell your team, and when did you tell them?
It was pretty abrupt. I mean, I had to come back from a meeting. The team had worked collectively on the proposal we put to Microsoft, and we had a very good disclosure. I'm a really bad operational guy, so I had a COO. I always work with somebody who's day-to-day or not operational, because I went through a lot of the learning experiences you two described earlier and kind of figured out I wasn't the right guy to be the operational guy a lot of the time. So I had an operational person, and she was excellent at getting everybody working together. And so the proposal we sent to Microsoft, which is still on my weblog, it's like a 50-page proposal, was the product of collective work. So everyone knew what was going on, everyone knew the score. And so we came back and said, it didn't work, they're not going for it. And absent the browser, we didn't have a business anymore. We really didn't. I mean, our revenues would have gone down to close to zero, and it wouldn't have been a smart decision for the investors to spend that money trying to change the model into something brand new. So we just said, let's close the company down.
Yeah. Kaleil? Yeah, go ahead.
One thing I can say is when you fail, and it's kind of like your company is like your baby, and heavens forbid if anybody in here has lost a baby. I haven't, but I have lost company. But what I've heard from people who have lost a baby, it really is difficult. And you have put so much of your time, blood, sweat, energy, everything into it that you really have a difficult time accepting it. So the normal pattern of human behavior, you saw some of that in here, but the progression typically is as follows. First step is denial. You just say, no, it didn't happen to me. Couldn't have happened to me. I remember that next day, April 2nd, I got up and picked up my briefcase to go to work, and my wife said, where the hell are you going? I said, I'm going to work. Did you do the same thing?
The same thing. I got in my car.
And, she says, you were just fired, honey. Come on back. I said, no. It didn't happen to me. It just could not be that. And even for a few days after that, if you are passing that building or within a few miles of that, your car kind of wears to go towards them because you think you have to be in the office and you just have so much responsibility. How could you be goofing around doing nothing, So denial is the first step that anybody who has had a major failure feels. The second thing is after you accept that you were failed, is the anger, what he is talking about, that you just say, why in the hell did it happen to me? I'm a great guy. I'm a victim. The rest of the world is bad. These people are bad. I'm going to suck it to them. I'm going to do this thing. And if you do something about that, you may regret it very, very much. So one thing I always advise the people is don't show a knee-jerk reaction. and let that period pass by. Whatever anger you feel, whatever you believe that somebody did you wrong, turn the other cheek and just take it in and give yourself a chance to have a way to really evaluate your feelings, evaluate your emotions, then take an action. The third part after this is acceptance, that you finally cool down, you really accept it, and grievance follows. So if you're man enough, you shed a few tears and start to get it. If if you don't shed tears, I don't think you can really come out of this. I didn't say if you are woman enough, because women have always had the major advantage that somehow they have easier time crying, and to me, that's one of the best ways for healing is to cry. And don't ever let any of this macho bullshit get in your way. It is one of the best healing things, and absolutely take a good cry, get over it, and that's after that you finally get the strength, get the things to start to say what you are going to do with yourself. And you find out as you get into that, you find out you're pretty okay, the thing is not so bad, and you can start to go move forward and do the right kinds of things. So some of the emotions you saw in here, I believe, is very, very typical of somebody who has had a major loss in anything.
For what it's worth, I don't regret the need. I mean, I did what you said that one shouldn't do, which is I didn't count to 10. I just.
Say you do regret or don't?
I don't regret it, no, because I think that when something happens, it depends if I'm maybe I'm still in denial, so that's possible. But if I am, I don't know it, so it's not going to help telling me. But
you are in denial.
But it's like there's a Thelma and Louise element where I did drive the car over the edge of the cliff, and if I'd have wanted to, there probably was a moment where I could have put the brakes on and thought about something different. I definitely understand that. Nonetheless, I almost feel better that I drove the car over the cliff, because the end result, if I'd have put the brakes on, and I would have had to have really adjusted the relationship to Microsoft on their terms at a very much earlier stage. And I kind of knew that, but decided not to, because it's almost like life wouldn't have been worth living in that world. So it was worth taking the risk of winning, and then the world would have been okay. And I'd almost rather lose, and play for big stakes than win.
Entrepreneur, I have to disagree with you. Entrepreneurship is about positive thinking, it's about optimism, it's about believing you can go and change the world. And if you put your energy, each one of us have only so many hours, so many days, so many years in this planet. You can either put it into positive things to go and change the world for the better and do the things that really matter, or carry the vengeance and say, oh my God, what happened before? These people were horrible, this or that. And I'm sure there must have been a lot of things. I have had the pleasure or lack of the pleasure of dealing with some of the organizations you mentioned. But you cannot let that get into your way of thinking. As an entrepreneur, you got so much energy, so much goodness in you, that you should just put the energy, positive energy forward. Forget about that, forgive and forget. And I can't say how much life would smile on you if you really...
Let me just ask a question here. Part of this, first, if it had been another organization like Hewlett-Packard, would you have had the same reaction? And so, it wasn't just a Microsoft.
No, because actually I liked philosophically, my sociology background, I used to argue against people who said Microsoft's a big bully monopolist. I used to say, well, they're big and they've got a huge market power and they are a bully, but isn't that because they're successful? Yeah. So I was not anti-Microsoft at all. Quite the opposite.
Well, my question here is, isn't there a point in time where challenges are what drive you? So going back to the point, not when he decided to put up his weblog, but back to the point in time where Keith was saying, I want to take this risk. I could have sort of made a less interesting business, but I was shooting for a more interesting business. That's a little different than
Yeah, but you could have stopped that and gone and done the next great thing. Why should you? I mean, again, why should one go and spend so many hours, days, weeks, months grieving and being negative and,
I think
unless it's part of your therapy.
That's what I think.
I don't want to kind of...
So I want Kaleil to get in here now, but answer, respond, but then also take us to this from the point of despair. So how did you begin to build yourself up to bounce back? And what kinds of things have you done differently since then?
Right. Well, actually, what I was going to say is a segue into that. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to be a peacemaker, but I actually think the truth is in the middle, because I think that you said something. You said forgive and forget, and actually I think forgive, don't forget. And so what I mean by that is that I actually think you need to embrace failure. Mm-hmm. I think you need to actually delve into it and really discover. So with due respect, I think maybe that's something that you didn't do in terms of kind of saying, okay, this has happened, now I'm attacking the problem, and I can relate to that. But if you kind of say, okay, I'm positive energy, I'm going to move on to the next thing, and you just kind of wash your hands of it, you don't get all the lessons you know.
No, I have not forgotten my sins. I was just saying forget the sins of the others. My sins, my God,
Okay.
So
I did quite a few priests to absolve me of my sins, and every time I go to one of them, they say, life is too short. We don't have the rest of our time to, give you absolution. So,
well, also this is a small world. In the company I'm with now, I'm dealing with Microsoft, and no, it gets worse. The guy who was the corp dev guy who was responsible for the RealNames relationship at Microsoft now runs Placeware at Microsoft, and he's directly the guy I'm talking to in this new company. And many of you may know Daniel Lewin, who runs here in the Bay Area. Daniel was very involved in the RealNames situation. He's also very involved in the relationship now with the company I'm at now. So, we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago where Daniel came to me and said, no hard feelings. And I thought it was a question, but it wasn't. It was a statement. He was saying he had no hard feelings about my weblog. Yeah. So I said, well, I haven't got any hard feelings about what you did either. Business is business. Yeah. But I still think it was the wrong thing to have done. I can't. In a way, I'm optimistic and positive, and I was trying to change the world. But I made the mistake of thinking I could beat Microsoft.
Saying that the question is mutual destruction better than you lose for a while, let the other side win, and you go and win a bigger thing later on. And to me, always on an entrepreneur, you put your energy into positive.
So I want to do that. I want to put their energy. So coming back, all right. So Kaleil, how did you sort of work your way out of this and get the energy to come back and start another company? And
I think that's incredibly important, because we're talking about it from an intellectual perspective, but in the moment it's anything but, for the reasons that have been articulated by both Keith and Kamran. First of all, I didn't go through the story of GovWorks. I'm not going to do that because we don't have the time. But lots of common mistakes around losing focus on product, trying to grow too fast, mistiming, misapprehending our sales cycle, and so forth. But let me tell you that the emotion was such that I had difficulty kind of really articulating what had happened to my own family. I felt like a failure to my own family. When you feel that, you've hit the wall. There was the night prior to the board meeting, and I actually did know the board meeting was happening. I just wasn't invited. The night prior, not only did I not sleep, but I literally spent the evening on a hardwood floor in a fetal position. True story. Called my mother twice and could not bring myself to actually speak into the phone. So I 100% agree that sometimes you just need to kind of cry it out. And I thought I wasn't allowed to do that, and it came out in all sorts of other ways. I had, at our peak, we had about 350 employees, and when we sold it, we had about 75. So similar type of downsizing, very rapid over the course of about 6 months. During that downsizing process, I think because we built such a culture of optimism and of a change the world mentality. We were trying to make government work better, called it GovWorks, because it was about that, about transparency and efficiency in government processing. And that was so, therefore, the bubble was big financially, but it was also big emotionally for people involved. I had a hole that was drilled through my transmission in my car. Waited to work one morning. I almost had an accident as a result. I had someone throw a paving stone through my window. I was getting a lot of prank calls, including prank calls that involved death threats. I mean, it was a really unpleasant experience. But what allowed me to get out of it was two things, and this is maybe not what you've heard before, but it's true in my experience. One was going through the restructuring part of it was incredibly cathartic. And so what happened is, I think in most cases, and I don't blame entrepreneurs for this, mostly it's not their choice, but in most cases when you're on the downside of the slope, actually it sounds like the easy side of the slope, when you're on the downside of a situation, you tend to get booted. You tend to get fired, or you somehow are removed from the situation or remove yourself. I had the opportunity, and I see it now as a golden opportunity, to stay through the restructuring, which was really a year long. And doing that actually forced me to understand what we did wrong much better and understand that failure is a group event. And I don't say that here. I probably would have, 2 years ago, I probably would have sat here and said that more in or 3 years ago from a defensive posture. So I don't say that here to say, well, it wasn't just my fault. I had Henry Kravis on my board, and he had been in business for 40 years. What the hell was he doing, kind of thing. But more that you just, in the same sense that success is a group event, even though people that are successful sometimes like to act like it wasn't, failure is a group event. And there were lots of people contributing to it. And when you go through the process of dissecting it, which is what corporate restructuring is often about, you're forced to recognize that. And it actually allows you to see, how about this, errors that you didn't make, but that you might make tomorrow if you hadn't gone through the restructuring process. One of the problems, I think, when going through failure events as entrepreneurs, and if you are an entrepreneur, and I think the vast majority of this crowd is, you will have failure. You might not admit it to everyone else in the room, you probably already have, but you will have it if you haven't, guaranteed. And one of the mistakes is coming out and saying, okay, let me file that lesson. I learned not to spend money too quickly. If, goes in my hanging file. It's not that simple. There were lots of problems, usually around communication, around honesty with others or yourself, around product development, around listening to the customer. There's lots of lessons layered on each other. You know why? Because even in successful situations, there are lots of mini failures, as you talked about. So even in successful situations, there are lots of lessons around failure. So in a real big failure, there's going to be even more. So going through, I highly encourage you to really go through the difficult stuff, and don't just kind of get up. And that's why I was giving out. Don't just kind of get up and walk away, but go through it. And the second, and this is probably the one that sounds more cliche, is having the pole, the anchor that's non-business. And I think that it's easy to talk about that when you're in success mode as an entrepreneur. Oh, I do exercise each day, or I really am religious about spending time with my family, or I'm taking a break and taking long weekends in the outdoors, whatever it is. But often when you're in a crisis mode, that discipline disappears, and you stop doing those things that you need to do, whether it's meditating in the morning or going for a jog in the afternoon. And it's when you're in a crisis mode when you need those anchors the most. And I had lost those anchors. And I think actually, I don't mean to sound too mystical about this, but I think a large reason that we failed was I had lost those anchors. And there were a couple of moments in which I could have either pushed for a sale to take place, or we had an offer for the company, and I had kind of let go of my moorings. I had let go of what I knew was the right thing. And I think it's partly because I wasn't taking enough time with myself, and in my case, my own meditation practice. So when I was going through crisis mode, I started to go back to those anchors. They say that there's, I don't remember the exact saying. Someone help me out here. But the faith in God is greatest in the
Time of crisis.
No, but it's in the trenches in war or something like that. Well, you go back, in time. Effectively, you go back to those practices. But I did that, and that's what enabled me to get up again. And it's also what enabled me to actually not only get up again, but embrace the failure experience and actually take those lessons, effectively trying to kind of collate them, and raise a fund and a restructuring business, and then we raised a fund around investing in troubled situations and actually bringing those lessons to bear. So I actually am thankful on lots of levels. Thankful on personal development level, but lest that sound too kind of airy-fairy to you, I'm actually thankful on a real concrete money-making level because we've had a couple of good investments that I never would have known how to do and carry out if I had not gone through the failure experience.
Keith, what about you? I mean, when you bounced back, was this a hard thing for you to do to found Santa Cruz Networks? Was it easy? What about, you just said that your Microsoft people that you engaged with are now engaged again. I mean, they're not holding this against you. Did you find any problems with yourself or others doing this?
For me, it was there's a two-phase process. First was healing, and then second was bouncing back. And for me, there's a time gap between the two. You talked about losing a child. The nearest equivalent experience I could have is, when I was younger, losing an important relationship. If you've been in anyone who's been in a long-term relationship where you didn't choose to end it, but it ended, whatever you felt then, the one thing you know for sure is you don't want to go into another serious relationship next week. I mean, you just, no way. You need to just take a breather and, get away from everything and become yourself again. And I was really, me and my wife have been married 12 years, and we had our first child in March 2001. So when this happened, he was 1 year old. He's about to be 3, and we've now got a 1-year-old as well. So I've had some successful companies, so we could afford to take time out. So we traveled. We went. She's South African. We bought a house in Cape Town. We renovated the house. We had another child. We went to Greece. We went to Spain. It sounds wonderful, but it was really all the time my mind was just getting away from all those experiences and distancing myself from them and learning to understand them and be comfortable with them. All of that. And I don't think it would have been I was approached by a number of people during that period and asked to go and investigate working with them. And I kind of was a bit tempted and went to look, and I never really felt like I wanted to throw myself into something. So by the time I've been at Santa Cruz Network since March 2003, so that's roughly a year. Yeah. And I was approached by a local venture capitalist, Tim Draper, who just invested in the company and said, would I take a look? And what happened is I couldn't believe the technology that I saw. It's a voice and video and data over IP technology. And, we could have 200 people attending this room right now using it just over the internet. It's unbelievable. So what happened with me, I just got really excited about the technology and its social implications. And that drives me. I'm not really able to be an entrepreneur on call. I've actually got to be excited.
It sounds like the time you took off was also very important to you. Kamran, I know that you spent, I think, a year in Europe. Is that right?
Not just in Europe, all over the world.
All over the world, yeah.
Actually, my wife did something which was quite smart. She knew that if I hung around and, employees would want to call me, the press wanted to call me because, the positive side of having great press and having your picture on cover of so many magazines, that's wonderful. The negative side of that is when you screw up royally, and then everybody wants to put your picture on the press for the biggest screw up, and for a while, I had the title of the guy who burned the most amount of venture capital in the shortest period of time, and I was champion, loser. Unfortunately, somebody started to lose more money in the shortest period of time, so I lost my championship title. And you could say I failed in failure also. I'm really pissed off on that. But no, my wife did something which was very smart. She took me to this private island in Fiji, and there was no news, no TV, no radio, no nothing, no fax, telephone, internet, nothing. It was just absolutely quiet place and private island. There were only, 10, 12 people around, and they would even recommend you that you shouldn't wear your watch, and so leave it behind. And I said, why? They said, there are only 3 things in this island you need to know. When is breakfast, when is lunch, when is dinner. And the natives would come and roll the drums, and you would know, okay, it's time for lunch or breakfast or dinner. So talk about real therapy that would really take you away from all of the hustle, bustle, the things, everything. And, it was fantastic. But as great as it sounds and as wonderful as you think paradise is, gorgeous, beautiful beaches and whatever, in a couple of weeks, I'm climbing up the walls. You get up in the morning and you say, my God, goddamn, another gorgeous day in paradise.
By the way, I still say that here. If you've ever been to the north of England.
Yeah, it just is, you get pissed off. You get tired of beautiful beach, gorgeous sunshine, nice things and this and that. All of that has meaning if you have a contrast, like you say, having been raised in UK, if you have the contrast that at the end of 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months, you have to go back to work and you have to get your butt kicked by your boss or whatever, and the things that normally happen which you are not pleasant at work, then you really appreciate your vacation. But if you know that you could be in that island or another gorgeous island for the rest of your life, it becomes really boring, because if you got lots of energy, at that time I was only 38 years old and had lots of energy, lots of things, and definitely staying there was not proper. So what I came back, I started to travel again. I would come here for a week or two and then be gone for another 2-3 weeks, months. I traveled into many different countries, and my problem was, I had lost my vision. What was it that I wanted to do? And as Keith said, people will come and say, maybe you want to be CEO of this company, chairman of another, be board member here. I just couldn't get excited about any of it. I just was not at peace with myself, and I needed to really understand what I wanted to do, because as an entrepreneur, typically you start a company because you believe in a product, you believe it would change the world, or you want to make money, or you want to become famous, or you want to be master of your own universe, be your own boss. And for me, all of these things, I had done it a couple times before at a young age, and none of that was really a driving factor anymore, and I was clueless. And when you don't have a vision what you want to do, life becomes pretty bad. So I took a whole year off. I studied many languages. I studied different cultures. I traveled all over the world. I studied many things. Religious ideas, became spiritual, started to think, Big 40 was coming, and oh my God, Big 40 is all going down the tube. And after that, one of the secrets is actually your 40s are 10 times better than your 30s. And I thought my 30s were 10 times better than my 20s. So somehow, the real secrets of life are not there. I'm not there yet.
When you started to get back from your periods of sort of stepping out, in the case of Keith and Kamran, or just from acceptance, there's sort of a mantra that says, people respect failure more than success in terms of a learning experience. What was the actual reality that you found in terms of trying to do your next thing, in terms of how people reacted to that? And did it actually open more doors, or did it close any doors, things like that?
Who wants to take that?
I could start. I think in Silicon Valley that if I defer to my colleagues about the truth of the mantra out here, but in New York it ain't true. I think that New York is a very conservative business culture, actually, in most areas. And what it did was force a great deal of humility, because when I would go out with the new project, I didn't have the wherewithal personally to take time off, and so I needed to accept. And I had also, to be fair, gone through the restructuring process, so I had some processing time personally. But I think I had to knock on 2 or 3 times as many doors as I would have, maybe much more. Maybe I'm underestimating than if I had a success. But the way I handled it was just getting to yes or no very quickly, and offering, but not leading with the ex mea culpa. So for me that meant getting some clients, and then quickly went into a fundraising mode so we could do some acquisition work. And I would go in and say, I just went through a huge blow-up and lost investors a lot of money. I think I learned a lot. That's what we want to do with this fund. I'm happy to talk about that experience if you want to. Otherwise, I'm going to go launch right into what we're going to be doing. And embedded in what we were going to be doing, that new pitch, were the lessons from the past experience. So what I was doing is leading with it, so diffusing the gotcha moment. Well, but, didn't you just have a bankruptcy? You start by saying, hey, I just had a bankruptcy. And secondly, just being willing to talk about it. What I found is that when I did that, most people would be okay hearing it the way I wanted to say it, and if they really had just a prurient interest in the meeting, which you'd be surprised, some people did, had no intention of investing or anything, that they sometimes even wanted to have a chance to give me a little whipping for a colleague that had lost some money or something. It quickly made that kind of a silly exercise, because they thought I might come in kind of arrogant and trying to hide my past or something, and I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with him that you need to put it up front. And from my side, when I was thinking, once I figured out what I want to do with my life, and charity and philanthropy became a big part of that, I was looking into how to go and achieve some of the goals that I had set out. I was wondering whether the venture capital community would be receptive to me. And within Silicon Valley, if you look at some of the sophisticated VCs, they have been around the block a few times, and those ones who are high-quality ones, not just the firm, but the individuals who have been around that, if they have seen your ups and downs, they know that this business is full of ups and downs, and they have had. If they're real good VCs, they have had some really big screw-ups themselves. I remember Jim Lally at Kleiner Perkins when he asked me to be on the board of one of his companies that he was involved as a part-time thing just to get my feet wet. I said, are you sure you really want me to do that? I just went through $40 million in less than 2.5 years. And he says, God, what took you so long and why it was so little? We lost $75 million in pen computing, and we are very proud of that.
Did Tim Draper think that what you went through in RealNames was a positive or a negative?
Well, it's interesting. Draper Fisher have been great to me. And John Fisher was on my board at RealNames, and he went through the whole thing. He was probably my closest confidant throughout the whole life of that company, and I learned a lot from him, and he gave me a hard time on occasion, and I gave him a hard time on occasion. And Tim didn't really know me. So Tim called me at John's recommendation, and probably didn't know what to expect, and we've gotten to know each other over the last 9 months. And just as a firm, it tells you something that they came knocking on my door about the way they view the world. It is ultimately all about relationships and putting the right people in the right place at the right time. I don't think there's any such thing as blind faith. I think it's very, as calculating as it possibly could be. I don't think it's that different to New York. It's just done in a different way. I find New York and California very similar, except for the New Yorkers tell you what they're thinking, the Californians hint, and you've got to figure it out.
Closer to Japan.
Yeah, probably.
Other questions?
I was listening to the Google founders and them talking about how everyone was saying it's such a bad idea, that we don't need another search engine. Do you have any advice about differentiating between when you're not doing well, when things are going bad, versus when you're still at this challenge of doing it?
It's really all about, are you doing something sufficiently unique that you're adding something to the world that no one else is doing. So another search engine, in a way, Google wasn't just another search engine, because Google actually found the stuff you were looking for. That made it unique, because at that time, and I was partners with every one of them, Louis Monier, who was the founder of Alta Vista, lives just up the road here. You talk to him, and he knew that Alta Vista was losing its ability to find stuff. It had a lot of stuff, but finding stuff was getting harder and harder, and Google had a clever way of doing it, so it wasn't just another search engine. You could say my current company is just another video conferencing company, but guess what? Video conferencing doesn't work. Everyone knows that, don't you? It never has. Well, guess what? It does now. So it isn't just another video conferencing company, and so you've got to look for something that really makes it special. So one of the interesting things about the bubble was people stopped doing that. It was almost good enough to work for any Valley company. So I did something like this at Kellogg I think it was actually it was with Warren Packard. So Warren, maybe you can remind me which year it was. 2000, I'm guessing, in the winter of 2000, but it could have been 99. And I had maybe 50 people about to graduate come and want to work for my company after that meeting, and that was quite typical. And they didn't have a clue, because I hadn't told them anything, whether my company was any good or not. It was, at that time, just everybody wanted to work for anyone. And so the ability to discern something that's worth throwing yourself into for probably 3 to 5 years of your life, was absent. It was really uncritical. I think now people think much more carefully. I get much less requests to come and work for the company I'm at now. And the ones I do, they've really done their homework. They really know about what we do and why they're coming.
I'm going to characterize what he said as you want to have the potential payoff very large to take these risks. But I think the question was more about what's the probability of failure.
In my opinion, if you look at any of my successes at Cirrus Logic, at Neomagic, at Centillium, CAE System, any one of these, there were so many times that we were right at the point of falling off the cliff, and just by sheer determination and the belief that, hey, ignore the facts, just move forward, do what you believe your heart tells you to do, is what we survived. So you cannot be faint at heart and just say, oh, something came up which is wrong and I better stop. But I want to come back to what Kaleil said, something which is very key. You need to have a group of people who are honest, open with you, and share what the problems are. Because fundamentally, when you go and start a company, I guarantee you, there's going to be gazillion problems there. From day one, entrepreneurship is about managing the failures. There are going to be lots of ups and downs, and there are going to be many, many mini failures. The sooner you know that something is going down the tube, something is going wrong, and you have open communication and your staff come and tell you openly that, hey, there is something that is going wrong, the longer time you have before you run out of cash, before your investors give up on you, before your customers give up on you, to go and fix that problem. So it's all about communications. And one thing that Kaleil said that really rang true is many of us, myself, I say this, who come from Asia, the Asian cultures is that you should be proud and you should only talk about the good things, and you should not go and discuss about your failures, or you should always talk about optimism, about good things, and about, it's shame to go and put your dirty laundry out and talk about the problems that are there. And that is something that, as a startup, you need to make sure you talk to many of your friends who might have that kind of cultural background to say, hey, it's not the end of the world if you failed. Tell us. If the customer found a bug in your software or in your chip, let us know. It's okay. Don't hide it. Don't try to fix it before you have to tell us that. That's a very, very key issue. So open communication and honest people in your team who really would come and tell you. Because the sooner you know about it, the longer time you have to fix it.